Hi, I'm Owen. I'm 19 years old. I'm from Newhall, California. This is my car. This is the 686 gas-modified Roadster. Don't really need that. Hey, can you turn on the front master up there? Okay. Yeah. So the process starting this car is pretty simple. There's a master switch at the front of the car. Then I have a master switch in here, on here. My dash is not currently working because data logger's out of the car. So pretty much all you got to do now, ignition and fuel off, crank it to get oil pressure. Okay, ignition, fuel pump. Yeah, I got into land speed racing when I was about 7 years old. My dad and my brother raced go-karts for a long time. Then he got into sports cars, got into the RX-7s, eventually got into Formula Regional, and then quit to join the Air Force. So my dad still wanted to go racing. So my dad got into the Model A engine, started rebuilding the stock Model A's, and then eventually got into girdling them, adding a 4th and 5th main bearing, turn him faster, go racing with him, and then eventually built his first car out of a Bearcat bomber fuel tank, and was racing with a Model A engine when I was probably 12 or 13 years old. But I started going out there when I was 7, started help setting up the course. Learned how to drive a car out there when I was 8 years old. But when I turned 16, got my driver's license, I got interested in wanting to drive. And this car came along through one of the guys that helped get my dad into racing, and they were looking for a driver. So they ended up sticking me in this car, and I drove it for a year before we got the record with a vintage 4-cylinder engine. And then after that, the owner of the car passed away, and the family decided to give us this car, as well as a couple of other engines to go racing with. This car was built in the late 90s by Nelson & Nelson Factory Racing as a side project. So Nelson & Nelson Factory Racing used to build Baja 1000 trucks and stadium trucks with the V6 Chevy engines, which is how they have a connection at GM to get the Auroras. So they built this car as a side project because they wanted to go out and play at the Salt Flats. So the engine that's currently in this car is a mid-90s vintage Aurora IRL Indy engine from the Indy Racing League before it was called IndyCar. And those engines were built by Oldsmobile, and they were a 3.6 liter twin overhead cam. They turned about 10,000 RPM. They were capable of 13,000, but they were limited down to 10 by the IRL. This particular engine is de-stroked down to a 3 liter for the F engine size class in the SCTA. Runs about 186 miles an hour on the short course and 215 on the long course. Runs on gas, completely naturally aspirated. It's running a Halibrand quick change rear end, Jericho style dog box 4-speed, and a conventional 3-disc tilt-in clutch, one of the little tiny guys. But that clutch holds up pretty much as much torque as you can throw at it just because of the sheer amount of area, because of the number of discs on it. The entire chassis is made up of 3/16 wall, 1.5 DOM chromoly tubing. The bottom rail is 3/16 wall, 2.5 by 1.5. That's bent here and here to create that bottom frame shape. The entire drive line is actually offset towards the passenger side of the car to get it as low as possible, get the weight down as low as possible. So the whole car is shrunk short, super short down low to the ground. So the rear end's offset, the engine's at an angle, the transmission's at an angle. So basically nothing is centered in the car. The wheelbase is fairly long for what it is. It's stretched about 4 feet from the stock length of the car. The body shape is based on a 1929 Ford Roadster, which originally the front of the car would have stopped somewhere in here. But this car is extended all the way out to the front with lead in the front, lead in the back, Watts-Link coilover suspension with about 2.5 inches of travel, which is not a lot, but it's a lot for El Mirage and Bonneville. This car runs at El Mirage Dry Lake Bed, which is out in Adelanto, California, about 45 minutes away from Lancaster. It also runs at the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah, which is about 20 miles east of East Wendover, Utah. So it's pretty close to the border with Nevada, and it's about halfway up the state. So the primary difference between El Mirage and Bonneville is El Mirage is on a dirt, clay, dry lake bed. It's real soft, silty, it's very dusty out there, and the course has a tendency to break up and get loose as the high horsepower cars run. Bonneville is actually a salt flat, which is literally, it's a bed of sea salt, and it varies in thickness based on the year, weather conditions. It varies anywhere from 3 inches up to a foot deep. And it's almost like driving on asphalt, just not quite as smooth. The other difference is El Mirage is 1.1 miles with 1.5 miles of shutdown area, and you're timed only at the finish line. So you're only timed at the 1.3 miles point. It's a 20-foot distance between the timing lights. At Bonneville, you are timed between the first and second mile, and you get an average speed over that full flying mile, and then the 2 and the 3, 3 and the 4, and then the 4 and a 5. Then you shut it down at the 5 mile. You can go all the way to the 5 mile, or you can stop as soon as the 2 mile. And your official time is your average time over the course of that mile. So you have to hold your speed there for a full mile. So if you enter at 180 miles an hour and exit at 200, then your average speed is going to be around 190. Whereas at El Mirage, if you go through the lights at 200, your time is 200. First time I drove this car, I kind of barely fit into an SFI 20 suit that my dad had laying around. It's real big on me. This is my first time really driving a car with any kind of real horsepower other than regular street cars. It's definitely a different experience because this car, you're pretty much laying down in it. It was my first time wearing a Hans device, first time having my arms constrained to anything. It's definitely a different kind of driving, different kind of car. But my first run, I went down the course at 123 miles an hour. My second run was the same day. I went down the course at 114 after missing third gear. The transmission's definitely different too. It's a dog box. There's no synchro rings. So it's you really have to muscle it into gear. Yeah, that was with a vintage 4-cylinder flathead. So the class record there is only, the last time I set it was at 133.86 miles an hour. So it's really not that fast. But on the dirt, it feels like you're going 200. First time driving it with the Aurora engine, I went 181.3 miles an hour. It's definitely a big difference, going from about 200 horsepower to almost 600 with the Aurora. It's also my first time with a engine revving that high. So the Aurora engine revving to 10.5 as a shift point is definitely a different experience because you feel like the motor's starting to lay over, but it's really not. You're still pulling all the way up until you get to that point. And then when you shift, it's like you expect with a normal engine, it goes back down to 2, 3, 4,000 RPM. When you shift with this Aurora engine, it's like you're going between 10.5 and 7,500 RPM. So you're just staying up in that top range and it pretty much never gets quiet. Yeah, it takes 2 of us to get the car out of the trailer, get race tires put on it, get it ready, fuel, oil, water, get the water heaters going. And then at the starting line, it's pretty easy. Just my dad belts me into the car, and then gets in the push truck and pushes it off. So in the SCTA and the BNI, you're allowed to have a push truck up to a certain point. So my dad usually pushes me with an '04 Dodge with a push bar on it and four-wheel drive. So it's push truck up to about 45 miles an hour until I'm able to get into first gear at about 6,000 RPM, because that's where it wants to start taking off. So it's definitely pretty slow up to there, and then once you're up into first gear, you almost don't feel it pull off the truck, but you feel the car just start to pull harder and harder and harder. You get more pressure on your back. It's a little bit different because you can't start it from a stop start. The only point you really experience wheel spin, we call it churning. It's because it's not really spinning in the same sense as with a burnout, but you get a little bit of churning. So we get about 0.5% of speed scrub, but that normally doesn't happen up until you're in third or fourth gear going 150 or faster, because the car, it's so heavy, you don't have as much torque to be able to break the wheels loose. Some of the higher horsepower cars have a tendency to get sideways coming off of the push truck, but with this particular car, it just kind of goes. You don't really feel the wheel spin at all. Depends on how many entries there are at the meet. If there's only about under 100 entries, then the rounds last anywhere from 2 hours, 3.5 hours. So it's quite a bit of time. You can't really go out and hot lap the car. But at Bonneville, it's kind of just as fast as they can get runs down, because there's no lineup numbers at Bonneville. So you just get in line, and it's just first come, first serve gets the course. At El Mirage, in a 2-day meet, you can typically get 3 or 4 runs if you're lucky. On a single day, about 2 runs. Depending on the number of entries, you can get more than that though. But I mean, it's fun. The atmosphere out there is great. The desert's great, the view's great. And then you get to see a bunch of cool cars. You get to see a lot of automotive technology. You know, Jezel Valve Train goes out there. They built that Ram truck that Chris Rasky drove for a little while. That thing is pretty cool. Yeah. Or you get to see like the Got Salt car, or the Beast with the 8-liter Chrysler engine. Yeah. There's some pretty cool stuff you get to see out there. If everything's good with the Aurora, it's minimal maintenance. It's just check the oil for flakes, check the filter, make sure there's no particles in it, make sure there's no rust, check the compression, leak down. The Aurora engine seals pretty good, so check for leak down anywhere from 6 to 8% is generally where it's at. With the vintage engines, it's usually something breaks every single time you run it. So it's either valve lash changes, or you bend something, or you break something. Or in the case of my dad's car, the last time we ran it, it's down a hole because there's no compression on cylinder 1. Haven't figured out why yet. With the SCTA, you can kind of show up, and as long as your car passes the technical inspection, you can run. To run for a record, you have to be a member of the SCTA, and you have to be current with a club. So I think there's 12 clubs currently. I'm a member of the Super 4s. So whenever I enter a car, I enter as a member of the Super 4s, and I'm allowed to run on records. But if you go out and you just run time only, you break a record, but you're not going to get it certified unless you join a club. There are production classes, but you're required to have a full roll cage with intrusion bars. You're required to have 5-point harnesses, fire suppression. You're meant to have hoops around your drive shaft. There's a lot of regulations, and you can't have glass windows. My current long-term goal is I want to get in the 200-mile-an-hour club at Bonneville, which this car I know is capable of doing, because it currently holds a record at 215 at the Bonneville Salt Flats in the 4 to 5 mile section. It's just going to be a matter of me getting comfortable with that speed and getting there. But after that, I want to start running some smaller engine classes. I want to get into some more combustion chamber development, port development, intake runners, just air intake in general, and get into fuel and ignition. I just want to learn how to make more horsepower out of a smaller engine. And it's kind of the perfect platform to do it.